Alright guys, Kremp again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. The drama returns to the Call of Duty League. This time, big discussions on challenges and the state of affairs in the entirety of the CDL. iLLeY, though, has confirmed his return to challengers play for the upcoming season, and the team that he's going to be rocking with has seemingly been leaked as well. How successful would that team be? What's his future going to be, especially when challenges is arguably a complete shambles right now and nothing has changed with the new season of the league? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. First of all, it seems like they have fixed, or at least attempted to fix, some of the issues with the ARs. We know that there were some bugs in play with the damage numbers on these ARs when they came into play with the new patch notes a couple of days ago. Middle of Season 1 is when we're going to get Hacienda in the game, it seems. That should be, according to some information so far, early December, which would align, of course, quite well with the start of the season. The problem is that I think it's unlikely we're going to get Hacienda for the first games of the season, because let's say they drop Hacienda December the 5th, the first games are on December the 6th, usually the CDL lock in the rule set on the Monday before the games begin. So even if the pros say, you know what, we don't even need to test it, we're just going to throw it straight in for hardpoint search and destroy control, whatever, it's probably going to be a bit too late to execute that on that particular occasion, but it should maybe turn around in the, course after that one. Now, this is a big note as well. So, JoeDeceives, who was formerly coaching the World Championship winning Subliners roster, left the organization at the end of the year. We know Cloud9 have gone down a different direction. Accuracy is now over there as the head coach. Sender has gone on to the Los Angeles Thieves. Now, JoeDeceives was linked, according to certain rumors, to be going to the Falcons. I think that was a reasonably substantial rumour at one time, but then I guess Clay became available, and therefore that's maybe changed their mind to some degree. So it, of course, ended up being that, JoeDeceives is now not going to be on that roster, and instead he's going to be coaching these boys. This is pretty exciting stuff. Strike checked on the guys over on their under-18 roster, coached by JoeDeceives himself. So, interesting. This is definitely a relevant discussion, though, when it comes to challenges today, because under-18 players, unfortunately, are, well, a dying breed here in competitive Call of Duty just because of the way the season is structured and the scene is structured when it comes down to the discrepancy between Tier 1 and Tier 2. And that's when a lot of the drama yesterday began on this one. So as the rotations say, there is a realistic chance that there will be no challenges open in Madrid at Major 1. So we know that Major 1 was meant to be Barcelona. It's hosted by Toronto. They've got a big Spanish contingent of their organization. Turns out they're going to do it in Madrid. That's fine as far as I'm concerned. Never been to Madrid. I'm sure it's going to be a spectacular event. But of course, we would like to see some challenger support there, obviously. And again, the CDL this year, what have they really changed for the positive? Okay, we have some minor tournaments now online, which is probably going to be for the better. And that's about it, within reason. It's not like we've seen major changes to the structure in terms of Tier 2, the development in Tier 1, which we know is a massive problem. I mean, look, you can just look at the reality that over, let's say, last season, we did not have the rookies come into the esports as we had in the previous several seasons. And this year, it looks like it's going to be a similar story again. The pipeline into pro is completely dysfunctional right now, and it raises big questions from my side, from many other sides. What is the longevity of this league? We had this conversation, to be fair, when Scump and Kremp and Karma and Formal and Octane and all these guys, Clay now, were deciding to call it a day and hang up the 6, alongside, of course, many others as well. Where would the next generation be? Would there be entertainment in the next generation? Turns out, as soon as those guys started to decide to call it a day, we had Scrappy and Pred and Drazah and just, other interesting characters come into the league. And maybe that'll happen again down the line. But right now, the season or the scene is not well structured to help that happen, right? I mean, the likes of Scrappy has been competing in competitive COD for ages, going to locals, playing search and destroy tournaments. That doesn't really exist anymore. The young talented players might be playing Warzone or Fortnite or Apex Legends or something rather than competitive COD. So look, as Adam says, I've seen the message about challenges at Madrid. It's the lifeblood of Call of Duty. We value its importance, but the likelihood for a Mad Lions challenges event is low at the moment. We're going to try our best to make it happen, and often it's, dependent on venue space. I mean, they've got to run a whole CDL event in the venue they're going for. I mean, even at Champs, they had the Challengers Champs, but it wasn't exactly the best setup because you know, obviously the CDL action is going to come first. So many, of course, were getting in touch with Adam and saying, hey, like, can we potentially make this work? And, you know, Adam says, you know how much we love the passion pit, but we're not planning on it for Madrid right now. Not possible with the time and budget available. Forcing it would be a disaster. So, you know, there's some debate. But then after further conversations, and this, of course, would be a completely shambles if you look at, you know, Challengers LAN to Challengers LAN. There was, however, further discussion to say that, all right, they are maybe going to try and make it work for Madrid, but for Toronto, as in for the World Championship, I guess, making it work there is going to be a challenge. So, look, I don't know. All I'm saying is it shouldn't necessarily be on the organizations to make this work, right? Like, the organizations that are running these events, I think are, you know, maybe this is controversial, but they're doing a service to the community on some level, right? Because lots of these events are not necessarily going to be profitable. They want to run one for their fans, can find a way to make it work. But we know that the CDL, they're not forking out the money to run these events. It's the teams that have to do it. And it's a big commitment from them, in addition to trying to, you know, find a way to run a 64, 128 team Challengers event over 3 days. Is a serious challenge with all the setup and everything that it takes. It's something that has been done, it will be done again, but it's obviously difficult to do, especially with PCs, right? No longer consoles. It's more challenging and budget orientated to execute. It's something that the CDL should 100% help support with the future of their league at stake, but it doesn't always seem like that's going to be the case. And Mack actually says maybe running the Challengers LANs separately to CDL LANs could be the way to go. Kind of how it used to be. I mean, there still are like local LAN tournaments, but you know, they wouldn't usually clash necessarily with CDL events. It would be you got your CDL event or your major events, and then on other weekends you're running Challenger tournaments or Tier 2, Tier 3 tournaments, whatever. And you know, it's a fair point that Austin says that really Challengers, with the exception of a couple of hours before the start of the matches on Sunday, basically is competing with the CDL for their viewership. The arenas don't have the space for it, and if you had an open tournament format, then yeah, you could feed it into pools, as you did, let's say, at CWL Anaheim 2019, or even 2018 Las Vegas would be one example. So Mack's idea is, okay, how about you run the Challengers event a week before the major tournaments, and then that way you can, you know, get better viewership for the weekends, reduce the cost, can partner with a local tournament organizer, and like as he says, the goal should be creating more opportunities for Challenger tournaments, each region having an elite. Austin's always full of great ideas on stuff like this, but as a result, there was lots of drama on this topic from the pro players, just discussing the way that Challengers is in general. I feel like Bant is kind of right on the money here. He says this: Challengers needs a huge overhaul on how it's run if we ever want to see COD get back to where it used to be. This, I think, is the big one, and it's honestly something which is not very often talked about. But in Valorant, for example, it's a shooter game, and in CS, it's a shooter game. There's no issue with young players under 18 playing, you know, maybe not in the professional league, but they can play other leagues below the top league, which only makes sense. So, you know, whether there's some sort of parental agreement or whatever, I think it's absolutely necessary, because if you have to be 18 to play in Challengers, like, wow, what are you going to do? You're going to play ranked, I guess, and try and get spotted there? That's what JoeDeceives basically did, and it kind of worked. But it's difficult to make that work. Obviously, Bantz's discussion is, look, just do more online so at least there's more action, which maybe is how it used to be. Like, obviously, people want more LANs, but at the end of the day, that is, you know, more action, the better for some of these players. And as he says, it's not realistic for people to commit to something for long when they turn 18, so letting them try out their dreams sooner will entice more people. And, you know, the events probably don't bring in enough money to make it worthwhile to do it on LAN, so you could do other things with the money. So I think Bantz is on the money here, really. But there's then this further discussion on when the players actually practice, because what we tend to see is that many of the Challenger teams, they will scrim at basically the same time that the pros scrim, which is somewhat confusing just because it can clash with regular jobs. Now, of course, there's discussion here from Federer and says, oh, well, if you were to move the scrims to 8 p.m. rather than, because most pro teams scrim at like 1 p.m., 4 p.m., those are kind of the slots. But as he says, if you added an 8 p.m. scrim every day, do you think that's enough to be able to compete with the top dogs, you know, the top teams? There's always some sacrifice involved. So, you know, Federer's making that argument. But of course, the other argument is from some of the players is that, hey, there's got to be a reason why certain players can actually do something else as a backup, right? The argument is, okay, players can go to school in the day or work during the day. They come home and then practice at night. Whereas the way that it currently is, people effectively have to sacrifice. They don't necessarily have to. It's obviously a challenge and it's a compromise, and this is what Slasher discusses here in the replies. But the argument is basically that in an ideal world, you may be able to do both, but it's realistically difficult to manage that, and therefore many players are just grinding challenges with nothing else as a backup plan. And that's kind of what Methods is getting at, is saying it's outrageous that people sacrifice work or school for challenger scrims. Way more people will not get a shot compared to those who will get a shot, and usually it's, you know, bad team, no salary, even if you do get a shot in the first place. Slasher says, look, it can be possible to go to work or school, come back and then play. That's what Slasher did when he was balancing it back in the day, but even then, as Donny says, like, you know, there was obviously sacrifices, and it meant that Slasher wasn't as good as he could have been at the time. And look, Fellow says, I get that perspective, Methods. I just don't believe that an 8 PM scrim will help as many people as it's saying. Not to mention, I don't get what's stopping challenger teams already getting an 8 PM scrim. Method says that's what they used to do, but you know, now they tend to go about it a slightly different way. And the argument is, and it's a fair argument from Aches, that back in the day when teams were, and challengers players, it wasn't really challengers back then, but let's say if you weren't on a pro team, you were sacrificing a lot to make that work, but the upside back then was worth it. Today, is the upside worth it? I mean, maybe, but it's just not really so clear that it is with the way that the CDL is currently structured. So obviously there's going to be a debate here between the OGs who, you know, they did, you know, obviously sacrifice a lot to make it work and make their career happen. But yeah, as Slasher says, then don't sacrifice work and then, you know, maybe scrim afterwards or make it work with your team when you possibly can. And it's unfortunate that we get to this position, but I'm not saying that Parasite is necessarily wrong when he says, as much as I love challengers and support you guys, I'll say it again, go to school and play, get a job and play, change the scrim schedule. I promise it's not worth investing full time for most of you. You're wasting your life. Now, for those of the guys that make it, fair enough, like, it's going to work out. But I think Parasite's probably right that the way the CDL currently is it worth it to commit full time to playing challengers and potentially no money? And, you know, what return do you really get if you actually do make it? Potentially there's an upside, but it's not much of one, and the, you know, the expected value of your return of investment here is just basically non-existent. So that's the argument for a lot of the challengers players right now. And as Jacob says, challengers still operating on the same scrim schedule of the pros is ridiculous. This is 100% what they've got to do. However, challengers might not be dead quite yet, because iLLeY is officially back in business for the upcoming season. We heard yesterday that he turned down offers from potentially CDL teams to get a shot here again and to get a better shot if he kills it in challenges. So he confirms yesterday FA for the 2025 Challenger season. This, by the way, is the rumor on the team that he's going to have. So he's meant to return with Flames, course former Los Angeles Guerrillas man from last season, Ghosty, a name who's been around for some time, and Fire. So Fire 40 got his shot back in Cold War. Didn't have the best time, of course, but I think he's done a much better job over the last couple of seasons. And despite the, you know, the name difficulty that Fire has after the difficult Legion stint a couple of years ago, I think there's a chance for him. So Cruz is out, iLLeY is into that roster. Very excited to see how he gets on, of course. But yeah, iLLeY's back in business. Is he going to be the man to turn challengers around and try and help those guys? Because it's got to be said, it's not like the league is in an excellent position right now from top to the very bottom. And, you know, even as Gravity says, challengers is chalked. Just have some fun and some laughs. Maybe try and win some money. Which is like, wow, it's a pretty sad state of affairs when you've got top players, top challengers players at least, basically saying that, you know, what are we even doing here anymore? There isn't really the upside in the league. So, you know, often we talk about the top level of this league, but certainly you've got to look to the future and say, well, if tier 2 doesn't work, if the pipeline isn't operational, then the future of the league is in jeopardy. So the CDL, I'm sure, know about this. Whether they have the budget or the resources or the willingness to do something about it, that is another question. But very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.
I'm trying to flip a shard up.
Fire in middle.
One two left or something. I'll kill off. Give me 1 second.
Bro, me and this guy just fucking
One's running them in.
stayed alive.